Continuing from chapter 27, my TV is sent by television. My TV was even more excited than Grandpa Joe at seeing a bar of chocolate being sent by television. But Mr. Wonka, he shouted, can you send other things to the air in the same way? Breakfast cereal, for instance? Oh, my sainted aunt, cried Mr. Wonka. Don't mention that disgusting stuff in front of me. Do you know what breakfast cereal is made of? It's made of all those little curly wooden shavings you find in pencil sharpeners. But could you send it by television if you wanted to, as you do chocolate? Asked Mike TV. Of course I could. And what about people? Asked Mike TV. Could you send a real live person from one place to another in the same way? A person? Cried Mr. Wonka. Are you off your rocker? But could it be done? Good heavens, child. I don't really know. I suppose it could. Yes, I'm pretty sure it could. Of course it could. I wouldn't like to risk it, though. It might have some very nasty results. But Mike TV was already off and running. The moment he heard Mr. Wonka say, I'm pretty sure it could, of course it could. He turned the other way and started running as fast as he could towards the other end of the room where the great camera was standing. Look at me, he shouted as he ran. I'm going to be the first person in the world to be sent by television. No, 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 cried Mr. Wonka. Mike, screamed Mrs. TV. Mike, come back, stop. You'll be turned into a tiny million pieces. But there was no stopping Mike TV now. The crazy boy rushed on, and when he reached the enormous camera, he jumped straight for the switch, scattering Oompa Loompas left and right as he went. See you later, alligator, he shouted, and he pulled down the switch. And as he did so, he leapt into the full glare of the mighty lens. There was a blinding flash. Then there was silence. And Mrs. TV ran forward, but she stopped dead in the middle of the room. And she stood there. She stood staring at the place where her son had been. And her great red mouth opened wide, and she screamed, He's gone! He's gone! Great heavens, he has gone, shouted Mr. TV. Mr. Wonka hurried forward and placed a hand gently on Mrs. TV's shoulder. We shall have to hope for the best, he said. We must pray that your little boy will come unharmed at the other end. Mike, screamed Mrs. TV, clasping her head in her hands. Where are you? I'll tell you where he is, said Mr. TV. He's whizzing around above our heads in a million tiny pieces. Don't talk about it, wailed Mrs. TV. We must watch the television set, said Mr. Wonka. He may come through any moment. Mr. and Mrs. TV and Grandpa Joe and little Charlie and Mr. Wonka all gathered around the television and stared tensely at the screen. The screen was quite blank. He's taking a heck of a long time to come across, said Mr. TV, wiping his brow. Oh dear, said Mr. Wonka. I do hope that no part of him gets left behind. What on earth do you mean? Asked Mr. TV sharply. I don't wish to alarm you, said Mr. Wonka, but it does sometimes happen that only about half the little pieces find their way into the television set. It happened last week. I don't know why, but the result was that only half a bar of chocolate came through. Mrs. TV let out a scream of horror. You mean only a half of Mike is coming back to us? She cried. Let's hope it's the top half, said Mr. TV. Hold everything, said Mr. Wonka. Watch the screen. Something's happening. The screen had suddenly begun to flicker. Then some wavy lines appeared. Mr. Wonka adjusted one of the knobs, and the wavy lines went away. And now, very slowly, the screen began to get brighter and brighter. There he comes, yelled Mr. Wonka. Yes, that's him all right. Is he in one piece? Cried Mrs. TV. I'm not sure, said Mr. Wonka. It's too early to tell. Faintly at first, but becoming clearer and clearer every second, the picture of Mike TV appeared on the screen. He was standing up and waving at the audience and grinning from ear to ear. But he's a midget, shouted Mr. TV. Mike, cried Mrs. TV. Are you all right? Are there any bits of you missing? Isn't he going to get any bigger? Shouted Mr. TV. Talk to me, Mike, cried Mrs. TV. Say something. Tell me you're all right. A tiny voice, no louder than the squeaking of a mouse, came out of the television set. Hi, Mom, it said. Hi, Pop. Look at me. I'm the first person ever to be set by television. Grab him, ordered Mr. Wonka. Quick. Mrs. TV shot out a hand and picked the tiny figure of Mike TV out of the screen. Hooray, cried Mr. Wonka. He's all in one piece. He's completely unharmed. You call that unharmed? Snapped Mrs. TV, peering at the little speck of a boy who was now running to and fro across the palm of her hand, waving his pistols in the air. He was certainly not more than an inch tall. He's shrunk, said Mr. TV. Of course he's shrunk, said Mr. Wonka. What did you expect? This is terrible, wailed Mrs. TV. What are we going to do? And Mr. TV said, we can't send him back to school like this. He'll get trotted on. He'll get squashed. He won't be able to do anything, cried Mrs. TV. Well, yes, I will, squeaked the tiny voice of Mike TV. I'll still be able to watch television. Never again, shouted Mr. TV. I'm throwing the television set right out the window the moment we get home. I've had enough of television. When he heard this, Mike TV flew into a terrible tantrum. He started jumping up and down on the palm of his mother's hand, screaming and yelling and trying to bite her fingers. I want to watch television, he squeaked. I want to watch television. I want to watch television. I want to watch television. Here, give it to me, said Mr. TV, and he took the tiny boy and shoved him into the breast pocket of his jacket and stuffed a handkerchief on top. Squeals and yells came from inside the pocket, and the pocket shook as the furious little prisoner fought to get out. Oh, Mr. Wonka, wailed Mrs. TV, how can we make him grow? Well, said Mr. Wonka, stroking his beard and gazing thoughtfully at the ceiling, I must say that's a wee bit tricky, but small boys are extremely springy and elastic. They stretch like mad. So what we'll do, we'll put him in a special machine that I have for testing the stretchiness of chewing gum. Maybe that will bring him back to what he was. Oh, thank you, said Mrs. TV. Don't mention it, dear lady. How far do you think he'll stretch? Asked Mr. TV. Maybe miles, said Mr. Wonka. Who knows? But he's going to be awfully thin. Everything gets thinner when you stretch it. You mean like chewing gum? Asked Mr. TV. Exactly. How thin will he be? Asked Mrs. TV anxiously. I haven't the foggiest idea, said Mr. Wonka, and it doesn't really matter anyway, because soon we'll fatten him up again. All we have to do is give him a triple overdose of my wonderful super vitamin chocolate. Super vitamin chocolate contains huge amounts of vitamin A and vitamin B. It also contains vitamin C, vitamin D, vitamin E, vitamin F, vitamin G, vitamin I, vitamin J, vitamin K, vitamin L, vitamin M, vitamin N, vitamin O, vitamin P, vitamin Q, vitamin R, vitamin T, vitamin U, vitamin V, vitamin W, vitamin X, vitamin Y, and believe it or not, vitamin Z. The only two vitamins it doesn't have in it are vitamin S, because it makes you sick, and vitamin H, because it makes you grow horns on top of your head like a bull. But it does have in it a very small amount of the rarest and most magical vitamin of them all, vitamin Wonka. What will that do to him? Asked Mr. TV anxiously. It'll make his toes grow out until they're as long as his fingers. Oh no, cried Mrs. TV. Don't be silly, said Mr. Wonka. It's the most useful. He'll be able to play the piano with his feet. But Mr. Wonka, no arguments, please, said Mr. Wonka. He turned away and clicked his fingers 3 times in the air. An Oompa Loompa appeared immediately and stood beside him. Follow these orders, said Mr. Wonka, handing the Oompa Loompa a piece of paper on which he had written full instructions. And you'll find the boy in his father's pocket. Off you go. Goodbye, Mr. TV. Goodbye, Mrs. TV. And please don't look so worried. They all come out in the wash, every one of them. And then in the room, the Oompa Loompas around the giant camera already beating their tiny drums and began to jog up and down to the rhythm. There they go again, said Mr. Wonka. I'm afraid you can't stop them singing. Little Charlie caught Grandpa Joe's hand, and the two of them stood beside Mr. Wonka in the middle of the long, bright room, listening to the Oompa Loompas. And this is what they sang. Okay, we're gonna watch a video for that because I can't really sing it.
There he is.
Mike. The most important thing that we've ever learned. The most important thing we've learned as far as children are concerned is never let them near the television set. Or better still, just don't install the idiotic thing at all.
Imagination dead.
Clocks and clutters up the mind.
It makes a child so dull and blind.
So dull. You can no longer understand the fairy tale of fairyland. The fairyland, the fairyland.
His brain becomes as soft as cheese.
Thinking powers must embrace. Cannot think beyond these days. Riding little Mike TV with very much regret that he shall simply have to wait and see if we can get him back this life, but if we can.
Sounds alright.
Ew, somebody grab him.
Okay, so we're going to continue reading now. Now, chapter 28. Only Charlie left. Which room shall be next? Said Mr. Wonka as he turned away and darted into the lift. Come on, hurry up. We must get going. And how many children are there left now? Little Charlie looked at Grandpa Joe, and Grandpa Joe looked back at little Charlie. But Mr. Wonka, Grandpa Joe called after him, there's only Charlie left now. Mr. Wonka swung round and stared at Charlie. There was a silence. Charlie stood there, holding tightly onto Grandpa Joe's hand. You mean you're the only one left? Mr. Wonka said, pretending to be surprised. Why, yes, whispered Charlie. Yes. Mr. Wonka's son exploded with excitement. But my dear boy, he cried, that means you won. He rushed out of the lift and started shaking Charlie's hand so furiously that it nearly came off. Oh, I do congratulate you, he cried. I really do. I'm absolutely delighted. It couldn't be better. How wonderful this is. I had a hunch, right from the beginning, that it was going to be you. Well done, Charlie, well done. This is terrific. Now the fun is really going to start, but we mustn't dilly, we mustn't dally. There's even less time to lose now than there was before. We have an enormous number of things to do before the day is out. Just think of the arrangements that have to be made, and the people we have to fetch. But luckily for us, we have the great glass lift to speed things up. Jump in, my dear Charlie, jump in. You too, Grandpa Joe, sir. No, after you. That's the way. Now then, this time I shall choose the button we are going to press. Mr. Wonka's bright twinkling blue eyes rested for a moment on Charlie's face. Something crazy is going to happen now, Charlie thought, but he wasn't frightened. He wasn't even nervous. He was just terrifically excited, and so was Grandpa Joe. The old man's face was shining with excitement as he watched every move that Mr. Wonka made. Mr. Wonka was reaching for a button high up on the glass ceiling of the lift. Charlie and Grandpa Joe both craned their necks to read what it said on the little label beside the button. It said, up and out. Up and out, thought Charlie. What sort of room is that? Mr. Wonka pressed the button. The glass doors closed. Hold on, cried Mr. Wonka. Then wham! The lift shot straight up like a rocket. Yippee! Shouted Grandpa Joe. Charlie was clinging to Grandpa Joe's legs, and Mr. Wonka was holding on to a strap from the ceiling. And up they went, up, 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 straight up this time, with no twistings or turnings, and Charlie could hear the whistling of the air outside as the lift went faster and faster. Yippee! Shouted Grandpa Joe again. Yippee! Here we go! Faster! Cried Mr. Wonka, banging the wall of the lift with his hand. Faster! Faster! If we don't go any faster than this, we shall never get through. Through what? Shouted Grandpa Joe. What have we got to get through? Aha! Cried Mr. Wonka. You wait and see. I've been longing to press this button for years, but I've never done it until now. I was tempted many times. Oh yes, I was tempted. But I couldn't bear the thought of making a great big hole in the roof of the factory. Here we go, boys, up and out. But you don't mean, shouted Grandpa Joe, you don't really mean that this lift? Oh yes, I do, answered Mr. Wonka. You wait and see, up and out. But, it's made of glass, shouted Grandpa Joe. It'll break into a million pieces. I suppose it might, said Mr. Wonka, cheerful as ever, but it's pretty thick glass all the same. The lift rushed on, going up and up and up, faster and faster and faster. Then suddenly, crash, and the most tremendous noise of splintering wood and broken tiles came from directly above their heads, and Grandpa Joe shouted, "Help! It's the end! We're done for!" And Mr. Wonka said, "No, we're not. We're through. We're out." Surely enough, the lift had shot right up through the roof of the factory and was now rising to the sky like a rocket, and the sunshine was pouring in through the glass roof. In 5 seconds, they were 1,000 feet up in the sky. "Lift's gone mad!" shouted Grandpa Joe. "Have no fear, my dear sir," said Mr. Wonka calmly, and he pressed another button. The lift stopped. It stopped and hung in midair, hovering like a helicopter, hovering over the factory and over the very town itself, which lay spread out below them like a picture postcard. Looking down through the glass floor on which he was standing, Charlie could see the small faraway houses and the streets and the snow that lay thickly over everything. It was an eerie and frightening feeling to be standing on clear glass high up in the sky. It made you feel that you weren't standing on anything at all. "Are we all right?" cried Grandma Joe. "How's this thing stay up?" "Sugar power," said Mr. Wonka. 1 million sugar power. Oh, look, you come pointing down. There go the other children. They're returning home.